Hello, thank you for listening to A Glimpse of the Kingdom. I'm David Pendergrass. Today I have a very, very special guest. I have my own precious wife who has an undergraduate in elementary studies and a master's in school administration, and she is a childhood specialist, works with kids all day long because right now, in fact, she's the head of a school at a private school. And something I wanted to talk to her today about is something so very important for us parents, and that is, of course, being able to train our children to be disciples of Jesus. And something we talk about in our home all the time is how to have good, accurate theological reflections. So instead of talking about that myself, today I thought it'd be real great to have my precious wife talk about some of her reflections on helping children learn about God. Is that right, Elaine?
That's right. In fact, I have a website called Teaching Kids About God. It's found at elainependergrass.com. I'm really passionate about teaching kids about God, as the website says, but also equipping parents with tools to do this well. I don't think that they often know what to do, and so parents take their children to church, and that may be all that they do. And what I find in the Bible...
Well, what's wrong with church?
Well, church is good, but it's not enough. You think about how much we go to church. If most families maybe go to discipleship classes or Sunday school classes for an hour, and then they may go to worship for another hour. So you're talking about one maybe deliberate hour for children each week. When you look at 1 hour in the scheme of a 24-hour day, in the scheme of a 7-day week, that's not much time spent learning about God. Also, being an educator, I'm very aware of how important it is to repeat things. So if children only hear an hour of maybe a Bible story each week, it's likely they won't hear it again. So that's all you get. Think about it in the relationship to school. At school, the kids are in school for 7.5 hours a day. They may have math each day for 30 minutes or an hour. So let's say they just had 30 minutes of math every day for 5 days. That's 2.5 hours of math a week. So when you have 2.5 hours of math and you have 1 hour of church, that's not very much time that we spend teaching our children about God. And yet as Christians, we want our children to be disciples of Jesus. How in the world are they supposed to know how that works if they only get an hour a week at church?
Yeah. That's all well and good. But Elaine, I don't have all that time. I work full time. I've got hobbies and friends and cookouts and barbecues and baseball and softball and football and dance and aerobics and gymnastics and whatever, right? These are the kind of things people say. So what are you going to say to those people who are saying, I'm just too busy to do all that stuff? There's a reason why I send them off to school, because I don't have time to just stay at home mom or dad to teach them all the time. Some people can do that, but if I can't, now what? Does that mean my kids won't be disciples of Jesus? Is that what you're telling me?
I'm telling you that your children won't know how to be disciples of Jesus if you don't take what we call teachable moments in education and make those useful. So you can take those moments when you're in the car. I know living in Houston, it's not uncommon for us to be in the car for 30 minutes to an hour to go somewhere. You can do those before bed. You can do those at dinner. You can do those after the game, before the game. When something comes up that relates to discipleship, about maybe a child treated your child inappropriately, and the way they are to respond is not with a hateful attitude and being mean back, but to love and to pray for them as Jesus taught to love and pray for our enemies. So it's taking all of those moments that come up in everyday life and teaching your children how a Christian should respond based on the example of Jesus and the teachings of the New Testament. So it's not about having time each and every day where you sit down for an hour or 30 minutes and have a family devotion at the table, which would be fantastic, but it's not realistic for those of us that live in the 21st century most of the time. So we have to take each and every moment that we have available and make it useful to us. I'll give you a few examples. Recently, we went to a wedding, and at that wedding, we were waiting in line to get food for the reception. And while we were waiting, I looked over at a fence. This was a rural area, and there was a vine growing on the fence, and it actually happened to be a grapevine. And so it brought to my mind the John 15 passage that talks about Jesus saying, I am the vine, you are the branches. If anyone remains in me and I in him, you will bear much fruit. Our children were standing there. We were waiting in line. They were a little bored. So we talked about, hey, do you remember a time in the Bible when there's anything spoken about a grapevine? And they brought up communion or the Eucharist or the Lord's Supper. And then I talked to them about that passage. It took just a few minutes, but it was an example to say, hey, we need to stay remaining in Jesus. We need to know the things that he taught and do the things that he taught. And by doing that, we'll bear what's called Christian fruit. Another fruit example might be if you see an apple tree or you see an orange tree, just to ask your child, hey, what kind of tree is that? Have them look at the fruit. And then just act silly about it. If it's an apple tree, say, do bananas grow on that tree? And the child will say no, and they'll think it's funny. Well, what about grapes? Are there grapes on that tree? And they'll laugh. And you say, you know what? There's a passage in the Bible that talks about bearing fruit. And it talks about the fruit of the Spirit. That when Christians are Christians, they should bear Christian fruit. Just like an apple tree bears apples and a banana tree bears bananas, we should bear Christian fruit. That means we should act like Christians. Of just a few examples in everyday life.
That's right, except that every single thing Elaine just said is completely wrong. So that was a good try, honey. Of course, I'm teasing. Just a quick note. Of course, she's right. Remember in Galatians 5, where he speaks of the fruit of the Spirit. Fruit is often used in the New Testament to refer to the outcome of something, the outcome. And we might even use the word synonymously, behavior. Jesus said there are two kinds of trees, one that bears this kind of fruit, one that does not. And then when he talks about how to recognize false prophets, he says, you will know them by their fruit. You'll know them by their behavior, by the lifestyle. So the fruit there in the ancient world meant something like the behavior or the results of their moral choices. So let me ask this question, Elaine. It's weird asking questions when I know what you're going to say, but they don't. What would you say to people who say, I don't know enough? You know, good enough for you, Elaine, great. You've got your degrees, you worked in church for a long time, but I'm not like that, and I don't know all the Bible stories off the top of my head. So what am I supposed to do? What would you say to them?
Well, the main thing I would say to that is you need to learn, because we can't be ignorant of what we say we follow. We can't say we're Christians and then not know what Christ taught. And so I would say read your Bible. You can start with the Gospels and learn the things that Jesus said, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You can listen to David's podcast and learn more that way. You can read my blog, Teaching Kids About God. You can get involved in Bible studies and hopefully attend worship services at church. The point is that you learn what the Bible says. Just like if I was reading a book, The Hobbit or something like that, I can't just talk about The Hobbit with my children. I have to know something about it. I have to read the book, watch the movies. In the same way, but even more importantly, because this is what we're about as Christians, we're following Jesus, we're disciples of Jesus, we have to learn what he taught. And so it takes a little bit of time and it takes a little bit of effort, but just like any goal in life, that's what we have to do. And this is of vital importance.
Very, very good. Let me ask you this question. What are some tips you can give parents on how to teach their children? So thinking pedagogy. By the way, pedagogy, if you know that term, is the science of teaching. Comes from the ancient Greek word pedagogos. Pedagogue, today we use the pedagogue as a technical word for teacher, right? That's used, pedagogue, teacher. In the ancient world, the pedagogue, as Paul refers to in Galatians, in the Greco-Roman society, was the person who was basically the nanny or the babysitter. Person make sure the child got to school and was there with them at school oftentimes, and then he walked them back home, made sure they did their homework, and did all that together as a child. Eventually, they outgrew it. The Apostle Paul says that the law was like that. It was like a pedagogue that was useful for a time, but then the person outgrew it. No extra charge for that. So pedagogy is the art of teaching. So what are some tips you can give to parents on how to teach their kids well?
That's right, David. Pedagogy is a science and art of teaching. So it takes both the science behind the teaching, how people learn, how the brain works, and then the art behind it. So you may be thinking, well, I'm not a teacher. I wasn't called to be a teacher. I'm a whatever it is that you are, fill in the blank. Well, you can learn to teach. There are certain things that you can learn and be able to apply them with your kids. So just as you would teach your child to put the napkin in their lap while they eat, or to brush their teeth for a certain amount of time and to do it a certain way, or to be polite when they meet people, all those deliberate things that we do, in the same way you need to be deliberate about teaching kids about God.
Of course, that's a very, very good point. I found it to be the case in my work with individuals and couples through the years, both in discipleship settings and in counseling and just normal conversation, that parents particularly rather, don't have not the worldview, but their mind's not made up. That, just as you said, they do teach all the time about moral issues, but also healthy issues like brushing your teeth. But they haven't made their mind up that they're going to teach about God, the Father, Son, or Spirit, anything about Christianity. And those that do, in my experience, unfortunately, particularly because I've counseled them, their parents taught them, but they didn't really teach them. They just yelled at them or made them feel guilty and shameful and so forth. I know that's not what you're saying, but in other words, it doesn't seem to be a lot of people who know how to do it in the middle of the road. So it seems to me at first they have to really, really understand, really grasp, really adopt the idea that they're responsible for it. And then secondly, that there's got to be a way to do it. There's some tips how to do it without coming across as just as a punk and a dominating person that will send your kids to counseling later on.
Right. It's not uncommon for parents to teach their kids morals. They talk about lying and telling the truth, or, doing the right thing, completing your tasks and all those. They teach them which teams to cheer for and which teams they don't like and all of those. But yet we forget, forgive this, but we forget to teach our children which team we're on, that we're on God's team. So I know that sounds a little bit corny, but really so many families that we cheer more for the teams and things than we do for God. And so we need to really work on that. And so really one of the very first steps is to realize I am responsible for my children's well-being. I like the passage in Deuteronomy 6 that talks to the Hebrew fathers, and it tells them to talk about these things, the commandments and the things that God taught them when they walk and when they rise and when they lie down and when they sit and all those things. And when I talk to parents about this, I often say that's exactly how it is. We need to remember these things and teach these things constantly. It's our job as parents. It is not the job of the church. They are designed to come along and support us. So first you have to decide that I'm going to do this, that I'm responsible for this, and I need to do the best I can. Another thing to remember is that the way that the brain learns. So we learn through repetition. Although that can become incredibly irritating to hear your child when they're learning something to say it over and over and over, or do the same thing over and over and over. That's actually how the brain learns. And so don't feel like you need to say it one time and be done with it. It's okay to repeat things. A classic example for that would be at Christmas time. I love Christmas, and so we watch lots of Christmas movies, and very few Christmas movies are about the real meaning of Christmas, which of course is the birth of Jesus. So when things come on, it often happens in Christmas movies that they say, well, the reason we celebrate Christmas is, and they'll say it's the love of family, or the reason we celebrate Christmas is because the holidays are a cheerful time and all those things. And they never say it's because Jesus was born. Well, when our children were pretty young, we really wanted them to know the real reason that we celebrate Christmas. And so my husband and I would say, David and I would say, that's not true. We celebrate Christmas because it's Jesus's birthday. And after we said that a few times, we noticed that our children would say that. They would always fill in the blank. So whenever they would say, the holidays are the time we celebrate family, our kids would say, no, it's not. That's Jesus's birthday. Or sometimes we would ask them, that's not true. Why is it that we celebrate Christmas? So repetition is a big part of what we do. Even to this day, now they're 8 and 11. And yes, we have watched a few Christmas movies, although it's only October. But even now, when those things come up, they repeat that thing. And so it's really stuck in them. And that's how I find that we learn as people, as young people, as children. We all learn through repetition. So don't feel like you can't say the same thing over and over. Another thing to remember about children and about a lot of adults as well is that we move from the concrete to the abstract. That means that we can see visible things, touch things, feel things, have word pictures or actual pictures. We're able to see that first and learn about that, and then we can move to abstract. Classic example of that is in math. When we start teaching math to young children, we often give them blocks to hold, or we teach them to count with their fingers, or we give them something, some kind of a teddy bear or something that they can feel and manipulate. So when they learn 5, they see 5 little teddy bears. When they learn 5 plus 2, it's 5 little teddy bears and 2 little teddy bears, and it becomes 7. After a while, that becomes ingrained, and then they're just able to say 5 plus 2 is 7. In the same way, anytime you can use physical things, whether at Christmas time it's a nativity scene, whether during the fall season you have a jack-o'-lantern and talk about the light of the world or something like that, anytime you can use a physical object or a picture or something like that, or something that your children have experienced, that's a classic way to start out. Another way that people learn is connecting what they know with new knowledge. So prior knowledge is really important when you're learning something new. I've heard people say, I need something to hang my hat on. The idea that if you have prior knowledge of something, you'll do better along the way. I remember when I was teaching in a state that did not have snow, and there was some sort of a question on the end of your test, and it talked about snow, and we thought, these children don't have any prior knowledge of snow. They're going to have no idea about what it means, what a toboggan is, or a sled or something. They're not going to have that prior knowledge. So we had to show them pictures and help them understand that. Show them videos so that they could wrap their little minds around it. In the same way, any kind of prior knowledge that your child has that they can connect, sometimes you can help them connect the dots, and other times they will connect the dots themselves. So think about your children's favorite books. Think about their favorite TV shows or movies and see if you can make connections between the characters, maybe in a way that Jesus would or would not act. Think about maybe in the story, if there's a storyline that might go along with a biblical story. And if you don't know all the biblical stories, start with morals and look at, did they tell the truth? Did they not? So you look at those kind of things and you can teach in that way. So far, I'll review just a little bit because repetition is good. I actually wrote a blog on that one time. We want to remember that we have to make a decision as parents that we are going to be the ones to raise our children in faith. Another thing to remember is that repetition is good. Another thing to remember is to start with the concrete, the visuals, the things you can touch, and move to the abstract. And the other thing we talked about is connecting to prior knowledge. The other tip that I would give you is application. If you know all these things but don't give chances to apply them, what good is that? So when things come up in everyday life, when your child fails or when your child does well, when you fail or when you do well, these are chances to say, look, we did it like Jesus wanted us to, or we didn't do it like Jesus wanted us to. Or in movies or in books when something happens. Something might come up in a movie and it's something that our family doesn't agree with because it doesn't have Christian values. Well, instead of saying, oh, we're never going to watch a movie unless it's rated G, we make different decisions in our family. Instead, we say, we'll watch it, assuming it's safe for our children. But at the same time, we'll talk through it. We'll have conversations about it so that they're not thrown into everyday life as they get older and older and older and have no experience of what the real world is like. We try to make applications for our children and show them how that works as a Christian, because that's how we do it.
That is how we do it. That's how we roll. Thank you, honey, so much. You did such a great job. Such a great job. I'll tell you what, you ought to have a website. Well, you do have a website. Remember? ElainePendergrass.com. Go there, check it out, ElainePendergrass.com, and you can sign up and get her blogs that will be updated automatically to your email. How convenient is that? It's free information from a specialist. That's good news. That's good stuff. So tell all your friends about it, all your parent friends about it. Even if they're not parents, they still want to be good parents themselves to other people's kids. You'd want to read all about it, all right? Of course, if you have any questions for Elaine, send her a message on Twitter at EWPendy. EWPendy. That's EW. Pendy is Pendy. So send her a message there, and she will be sure to contact you back. God bless you. Thank you for listening. See you next time. Thank you so much for listening to A Glimpse of the Kingdom. If you want to listen to more, go to my website, davidpendergrass.com, and look at one of the tabs that says podcast. If you click that, it'll take you straight to my podcast on iTunes, or you can search for it on iTunes if you want to, A Glimpse of the Kingdom. But also my website, you'll see another way to get, if you're an Android listener on your phone or you just don't use Mac computers. Again, davidpendergrass.com, and click podcast. It'll take you exactly where you need to go, and you can subscribe from there and get this as often as you like, and also see my blogs and so forth. If you want to get me to come to your organization or church, otherwise to do some consulting, you need to go to davidpendergrassconsulting.com. davidpendergrassconsulting.com. You'll see the information there. If you want to reach out to me on Twitter, you can find me at Dr. D. Pendergrass, at Dr. D. Pendergrass.